Your asthma's just getting worse, my mother-in-law purred, hiding my daughter's inhaler. Accidents happen, I smiled. Tonight they'd all be arrested. Mom, I appreciate it. We're going to be okay. Before the sun fully rose over Minnesota, a gentle glow emanated from the windows of a two-story home situated in a typical suburban area. Inside the kitchen, Carol Blake was occupied with making breakfast. She had her shoulder-length brown hair neatly pulled back, and the way she fixed her apron showed her usual detail-oriented personality. Katie, time to get up. Her kind green eyes glanced at the clock. 6 a.m. This marked the beginning of her predictable, everyday schedule. As the director of Sunshine Care Day Care Center, Carol's day began early. But even more crucial was the time she had in the mornings with 8-year-old Katie. Putting together her daughter's lunch with care was a tradition she always maintained, ever since her own mother passed away 19 years back. Morning, Mama. Katie, coming down the stairs, was a beautiful young girl who had her mother's green eyes and golden pigtails. As a third grader at Greenwood Elementary School, she was an outstanding student who Mrs. Johnson, her teacher, really trusted. However, she had dealt with asthma since she was a small child, something that continually worried Carol. The weather report said there will be a lot of wind today. Remember your asthma medicine. Katie nodded, comfortably used to her mom's concern. Her mother's excessive worry was simply a part of their daily life. Carol always, without fail, checked the security of the house. She always made sure the security cameras were functioning, checked the windows meant to be emergency exits, and made sure the condition of the escape ladders was good. Losing my mother, Ellen, in a fire 2 decades prior pushed me towards this. It occurred in Columbus, Ohio, back in 2004. My stepfather set the fire to get insurance money. My mom, asleep then, couldn't get out and ended up dying. This event fundamentally altered my life. I was also hesitant to get married until I met Mark at a charity fundraiser 8 years back. Mark Blake, who was a site supervisor at Connect Construction. I found myself attracted to his dark, short hair, his strong physique, and genuine nature, so I decided to marry him after we'd been together for 2 years. However, lately something felt off about him. He bought a fancy new watch, started working more overtime, and he always had his phone glued to his hand. Family talks became less frequent. Weariness showed on his face. Again, he was working late. When I questioned him, Mark just offered a vague nod. Our home had exceptional security measures and fire safety systems, even though we lived in a calm neighborhood. I had been insistent on having that kind of equipment installed when we purchased the house 2 years ago. Our mortgage was $300,000. We weren't exactly swimming in money, given our total household income of $120,000 from Mark's job and my earnings from the daycare. But there was a secret issue, and nobody else knew about it. Mark had a hidden $400,000 gambling debt. This casino debt was really putting him under a lot of pressure. I'm leaving. Saying this as I saw Katie off, I also headed to work. The seniors were waiting for me at the daycare. I'd secured the staff's confidence due to my composed management of crises and my friendly demeanor. It all seemed so normal on the surface. Yet underneath, a significant upheaval that would deeply impact our lives was silently brewing. One particular afternoon at the daycare, I was staring at our family photo, placed on my desk as I went through some paperwork. It was taken just after we'd moved into our new house about 2 years back. Mark and Katie were both grinning, and my mother-in-law, Helen, was standing there next to them, almost like she was giving me her approval. At the time, I never could have guessed how things would ultimately unfold. I can still recall the first time I met Helen, right after we decided to get married. She projected an intelligent persona that fit her past as a high school teacher, and she always dressed very elegantly. But there was something calculating and cold in her gaze, a sensation that bothered me, and I still couldn't shake it. But because I loved Mark, I had put that uneasy feeling out of my mind. My coworker, a nurse, snapped me out of my thoughts. I always stayed composed and deliberate at work. That was a trait I had intentionally developed since that fateful night 2 decades earlier. When I got home, I noticed a strange receipt on the living room table. It was from a high-end watch store, and the price was more than Mark's salary allowed. These kinds of confusing things had been adding up over the previous few months. "Mom, welcome back," Katie's voice called down from upstairs. Seeing my daughter always brought a feeling of warmth to me. Since I lost my own mom, I swore I would never let Katie go through that kind of pain. That's why I was incredibly careful when it came to our home's safety. Escape ladders were set up by every window. There were numerous fire alarms installed. Plus, I kept an emergency bag where it would be easy to grab. "Katie, should we do our evacuation drill today?" Yes. The weekly drill to practice escaping had become a normal part of our routine. Katie always took it seriously, almost as if she understood the importance of my dedication to this. My chest always felt a little heavy, even though it was just a drill. The memory of how my mom died still felt as clear as if it had just happened. I also never missed doing the bedtime checks. I made sure every window was locked, the security cameras were working, and I checked for anything dangerous. The safe with the life insurance papers was in its usual spot. The insurance coverage was for $1 million. It was a safety net in case the unthinkable occurred. Funny enough, it was the very thing that had led to my mother's death. Good night, Katie. Before I left her room, I always looked back one more time. What I'd learned from losing my mom: never take your guard down when it comes to protecting the people you care about. That was my guiding principle. In the dark, looking out the window, I found myself wondering, how much longer would things stay peaceful like this? It felt like I could sense a bad thing was coming. Summer was coming early that year, and the days were getting longer. Even so, by the time I got home, the sun was already starting to go down. I let out a small breath when I looked at the empty parking lot. Mark's car still wasn't there. Lately, this situation had become my everyday reality. My extra work hours, which used to be 3 times a week, were now a daily occurrence. Working on weekends intensified, and the time I got home progressively stretched from 7 in the evening to the stroke of midnight. We talked less as a family, and I wouldn't put my phone down, not even when we ate. "Dad smells different," Katie had whispered one day. Carol had picked up on it, too. There was an unfamiliar fragrance that lingered on Mark's shirt collar. It was a fancy perfume, a luxury brand, something way out of his financial league. The credit card bills revealed charges from unfamiliar eateries and upscale stores. A sense of dread began to build within Carol. What was even more unsettling was the presence of her mother-in-law, Helen Blake, who had relocated to our neighborhood 6 months before. The 67-year-old former teacher, with her short white hair and always present expensive pearls. Despite her outward friendliness, her gaze always seemed to be calculating. Her visits became frequent. She started meddling in everything around the house, and most annoyingly, she had a habit of butting into our conversations at the most inconvenient times. "Dear, let me handle this," Helen would say, always stationed in the kitchen. Carol felt a shiver down her spine when she watched her. The way she was so protective of her son almost hinted at something more than just motherly love. Then, one afternoon, a phone call from the company's accounting department introduced Carol to the name Jessica Morrison. Apparently, she was 29. I saw this woman, young and with a sleek dark bob, flawless makeup, and draped in expensive clothing. At the same period, Katie's actions started changing too. She started staying in her room upstairs more often and tried to steer clear of talking to her dad. What was most alarming was that her asthma flared up and got worse. I wondered, "Katie, what's going on?" Even when I asked her, my daughter would look like she wanted to say something, but then she'd stay quiet. I later learned that she'd been listening to her father's phone calls, picking up on them through the vents in her room. Scared by what she overheard, she had started secretly recording them on her phone. He'd talk with his girlfriend, discuss financial issues, and mention insurance. Katie held all of this as if it was too heavy to bear, overwhelmed with intense worry. And as it turned out, that fear was justified. One late night, Carol was listening to her husband and mother-in-law's voices coming from the study. "The clock read 1:30. If we stage it like a fire, it'll be perfect. The insurance will definitely pay." Her mother-in-law's icy voice broke the silence. "But is this truly our only choice?" Her husband sounded unsure. "Once those two are gone, everything will fall into place." Those words sent a shiver down Carol's back. But years of habit took over, helping her carefully return to her room without showing how upset she was. She double-checked the escape routes and what she had packed in the emergency bag. The most crucial thing was taking a look inside Katie's bedroom. The wind from the summer evening outside the window whispered through the trees. That noise felt like a warning about something terrible about to happen. As the night grew older, so did Carol's worry. After overhearing the discussion from the study, I stayed awake all night. While in bed, that horrible dream from 2 decades ago resurfaced. Had my own mother realized it back then as well? Did she maybe have a sense of what was going to occur on that last night? While fixing breakfast, I examined everything around me with extra care. Mark was already gone to his job, saying something about checking out some early morning sights. The sound of Katie's feet coming down the steps brought me back to reality. "Morning, Mama," she said with her normal, cheerful voice. But her eyes looked empty, like she was hiding something really difficult. "Katie, are you bothered about something?" I asked in a casual way, but my daughter simply shook her head. She had her smartphone with her, which she had somehow started always carrying around. Once breakfast was done, as I was washing the plates, the doorbell sounded. "Good morning, Carol." Helen was standing there, the necklace around her neck shining in the morning sunshine. Another surprise visit from my mother-in-law, which had become pretty regular recently. "I made Mark's lunch," Helen said, walking into the kitchen. Her actions made it very clear that she wanted to take charge of everything in the house. Helen, we can manage the chores here, I said, trying to be calm, but also being very clear. For a split second, I saw anger in Helen's eyes, but it soon went back to her normal, pleasant smile. Later that day, as Carol was busy with paperwork at the daycare, the phone rang. It was Mark's company calling. It was Jessica from the accounting department. Her voice had a certain elegance. Even over the phone, she made an impression. "Are you Mark's wife?" I asked. The discussion itself was nothing important, just confirming Mark's overtime request. Yet I felt a deliberate quality to her voice. It felt like she was purposely trying to make her presence felt. When I got home at twilight, Helen was lounging in the living room. "I was assisting Katie with her homework," she told me. It sounded so ordinary, but I didn't see any homework on the table. Later that night, after tucking Katie into bed, I double-checked all the locks on the doors and windows. Then I inspected the contents of the emergency bag once more. Flashlight, a first aid kit, and most importantly, vital paperwork. Everything was exactly as it should be. Looking up at the window, the moon was covered by dark clouds. In that darkness, I felt my determination harden, remembering how I couldn't save my mother years ago. But this time would be different. I would absolutely protect Katie's life and my own as well. I spent the long night alternating between worry about the future and strong resolve. Then at 5 a.m., when an unfamiliar noise drifted up from the kitchen, I woke up. A slight scent of burning filled the air, and my entire body tightened up. Memories from 20 years earlier came flooding back. By the time I stood up, I could see black smoke already starting to fill the first floor. The fire alarm began to blare. My years of preparation kicked in right then, starting to move my body automatically. Initially, I headed toward Katie's bedroom. I had the emergency bag all ready to go, sitting near the door. "Katie, wake up." I gave her shoulder a gentle but definite shake. Without giving her time to get confused, I immediately held a damp, prepared towel over her mouth. "Mama, it's all right," I told her. "We'll do everything exactly like we rehearsed." Fighting to keep my voice from shaking, I began to coach my daughter. The hallway was already starting to fill up with smoke. Setting up the escape ladder was a movement I'd performed countless times. I opened the window, ensuring everything was secure. The cool, dark air from outside rushed into the smoky room. "Take it easy," I said. "Mama's got you." When Katie tried to climb out the window, I realized she was beginning to have an asthma attack, but I had prepared for this, so I quickly grabbed the inhaler. Once we both made it safely to the ground, lights were starting to flicker on throughout the neighborhood. I heard someone shouting to call the fire department. Neighbors in their pajamas were rushing out of their homes. And there they were, Mark and my mother-in-law, Helen. They were fully dressed. It was like they were waiting for something. Their first reactions showed shock and panic, I could tell. They were surprised to see us, witnesses, survivors, outside of their plan. But then their faces shifted to other expressions. "Carol, thank heavens you're safe." There was an odd, almost fake quality to my mother-in-law's tone. "It's okay when the insurance pays off." Mark's words kind of faded away unnaturally. "You can come to my house," Helen swiftly added. I noticed a sort of playfulness in her gaze, as though she was already anticipating what came next. The fire truck showed up, blaring its horn. The sirens cast a reddish glow over the empty street before sunrise. Soon, police cars started pulling up too, kicking off the groundwork for a thorough investigation. Neighbors started coming together, bringing blankets and refreshments. Nestled within that group of friendly faces, I silently strengthened my determination. Under no circumstances was I going to stay at my mother-in-law's place. Despite that feeling, it didn't last. "In this instance, it would be ideal to stay with your mother," the officer said, putting forth a very persuasive argument. He was absolutely right. It made a lot of sense. My mother-in-law was offering assistance to a mother and her child after they'd lost everything in a fire during the middle of the night. Anyone watching would probably find that perfectly normal. Helen's house wasn't far from where the fire happened, just a few blocks away. It was an older building, a white two-story. From the outside, it looked well-maintained, but I found the place stifling. Helen said, "Use the spare room upstairs." I didn't like the spare room that Helen showed us. It made me uncomfortable. There was a surveillance camera in the corner of the ceiling. My mother-in-law said that it was for security, but its location made it obvious that it was meant for watching the room. The initial few days went by in a complete blur. Insurance investigators arrived and began their deep dive into the fire. The origin of the fire appears to be the kitchen's electrical setup. I squinted at the investigators' words, trying to recall everything. I distinctly remembered making sure all the power sources were off last night. The police also began their questioning. Was there anything out of the ordinary before or after the fire? When addressing queries, I was very careful with my phrasing. No real proof yet. However, I had to believe something was amiss. What worried me most was Katie's health. She was typically full of energy, but lately she'd become withdrawn. It was like this ever since she started staying at her grandmother's. Her asthma worsened with coughing fits at night. Don't fret, Grandma would say. I will make sure you're okay. Helen fussed over Katie, hovering close to her, which was quite unsettling. I sensed an immediate danger just watching them. At night, Mark would frequently disappear, claiming to be working. He'd make furtive calls, whispering into the phone. I figured it was Jessica. After that, I received some fresh information from the insurance investigator. They wanted to clarify a few things about the life insurance policy. I felt a chill run down my spine. Everything linked together. My husband's financial woes, his affair, and the fire. Even this feeling of being trapped in the house could be part of a larger scheme. Outside the window, the scent of smoke still hung in the air. That third night at my mother-in-law's, as I lay awake again in the upstairs guest room, I heard a gentle knock. Opening the door, I saw Katie standing there. Tears shone in her eyes. "Mom, I have to tell you something." A cell phone was extended towards me, shaking in her hand. My heart started pounding in my chest. "I've been recording Dad's phone conversations," she rasped. Her asthma was visibly getting worse, probably because she was so anxious. "I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you." I held Katie close. Her tiny body was shaking. I hit play and instantly I heard Mark and Jessica's discussion. They were chatting about the debt they owed, insurance payouts, and precise specifics for a fire. Then I heard the talks with her mother-in-law. All of it was clearly captured. "We must report this to the authorities." Carol's voice was firm and unwavering. Still, that resolution also meant new hazards. The following morning I was having breakfast, and right away I saw something unsettling in Helen's actions. On the table, there was a newspaper article about problems with the investigation into the fire insurance. Helen, her mother-in-law, had her gaze locked onto the article with a strange intensity. "The insurance might not be paying," I said casually. At that precise second, Helen's face became expressionless. "Well, there are alternatives if that's the case," her mother-in-law replied, but she didn't finish the phrase. I saw an icy glare in her eyes, one I'd never witnessed previously. That same day, I decided what to do. I'd phone the cops and tell them all about Katie's recordings. That evening, Katie's asthma took a turn for the worse. It was unlike any attack she'd experienced before. The inhaler, which should have been nearby, was gone. I instantly noticed the change in my daughter. Her face was turning pale, and her breaths were more difficult than usual during these attacks. "It's all right, I'm getting your medicine right now," I said. While I was looking in the drawers, Helen's voice floated up from downstairs. "I put the medicine away," she said. Her voice had a deliberate, chilling edge I'd never heard. "Quickly, the medicine." As I held my daughter's hand, who was struggling, a realization dawned on me. I realized that the fact that my daughter's condition had gotten progressively worse ever since we'd arrived at my mother-in-law's home was no accident. I now knew this had all been premeditated. I need to go get what I'm after. I gave Katie a soft kiss on her forehead, then I stood up straight. "Just remember to take deep breaths, honey. I'll be right back." Headed down the stairs, I saw not only Helen in the living room, but also Mark and Jessica were present. On the table sat Katie's inhaler, and there were also some medicine bottles I didn't recognize. Looking for this, I presume. Helen picked up the inhaler, and the way she moved was clearly meant to taunt me. "What did you do?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. The horrifying experience from 2 decades ago gave me a newfound resolve. "A clever person like you must have worked it out by now," I said. Helen gave me an evil grin. "I just tweaked her medication a tiny bit. That way it'll look like she died by accident. The insurance money will definitely." "What have you done?" Mark suddenly yelled, surprised. Bringing a kid into this was not part of the deal, he reminded her. "Shut up." Helen's voice was piercing. "You're getting cold feet now. Remember that $400,000 you owe. And you're planning on running away with your young lover. Everything has gone exactly how I planned it. I have everything on record." I pulled out my phone. The screen showed an active call with the police. "You made a colossal error coming after my daughter." At that second, the front door flew open with a loud crash. A wave of tension filled the room. I watched as Mark tried to run for the door, but suddenly the cops burst in. Jessica let out a yell, and her pricey purse slipped from her grasp. Everything inside spilled out onto the floor: fake papers, some flash drives, and also an insurance policy that I knew well. It was all the proof they needed. "This just isn't fair," I thought. Helen's voice shook. Our whole perfect scheme was falling apart right in front of me. "Are you assuming something is wrong?" Carol's voice was both firm and filled with sorrow. "You believed I was gullible, but you didn't remember I forgot things. I lost my mother. That situation kept me and Katie safe. The officers were systematically collecting the evidence. They found altered asthma medicine in the kitchen, plus insurance fraud documentation from the home office. Also, there was the security camera video. Everything was revealed." "Mom, why?" Mark sounded defeated. "Everything was for you, all for you." Helen finally broke down completely. "My son drowning in debt, tricked by that woman." "Excuse me, ma'am," a police officer spoke to Carol. "Let us go check on your daughter. The paramedics are on their way." Carol hurried upstairs again. Katie was already breathing more steadily, receiving care from a nurse. Mama, everything will be all right. We're okay now. Several weeks later, the trial started. The case was airtight. Insurance fraud was attempted, so was murder. And worst of all, they had harmed a child. The decisions came in. Mark Blake received a 15-year sentence. Morrison, who helped him, got a decade. Helen Blake, considering her age, was given 5 years of probation. As she left the courthouse, Carol gazed upward. The warmth of the spring sun was comforting. Mama, Katie held my hand tightly. What's going to happen to us now? We're going to begin a whole new life somewhere else. Carol offered a soft smile. We can manage any challenge as long as we're together. A year passed, and we found ourselves in a suburb of Minnesota. There was a little house, but it was cheerful, with a garden. Carol was standing by the doorway, chatting with coworkers from the daycare. "Hey, Mama," Katie shouted, running toward me after school. She was holding a math test that had gotten a perfect score. She hadn't had an asthma attack in ages. That's amazing, I thought. I embraced my daughter. The horrific memories we shared had turned into something that made us both stronger. A notice for a fire survivors support group, formed with the help of the community, was posted on the door. I used my experience to provide assistance to other people who had been through something similar. "Mama," Katie murmured after she'd finished her homework. "Do you know what? I've made up my mind about what I want to do with my life." "What's your dream?" I asked. "I want to be someone who assists people who are in trouble, just like you." I smiled warmly. Outside, I could hear the spring breeze shaking the new leaves on the trees. It felt like the wind was supporting our fresh start. The bad memories weren't entirely gone. However, the fortitude we developed in dealing with it now lived inside us, like a genuine feeling of optimism. We can't alter what happened before, but the future is different. I gazed upward at the sky.